I think gold could certainly continue to move, and without silver, with silver continuing to lag, ultimately there's a 90% correlation through all of history between gold and silver. One will not go to the moon without the other coming along for the ride, but they may not move in perfect symmetry. I mean, when you talk about the trade of a generation, it's the silver to gold trade. It's so far out of whack in every single metric, and that's the result of Western suppression. You can only manipulate a market for an extended period of time and pushing it in the direction it's going, and try to hold back this global demand by nations that are very motivated and coordinated now is dangerous. And I think you're seeing the beginnings of perhaps the suppression game coming to its end stages. I would never say go all in on silver. When you talk about the term asymmetrical risk reward, it's the finest I've ever seen. Lowest downside, highest upside. You know, it's pure mathematics. If you had to just say one trade that would net you the greatest return and have muted downside, it's silver, period. If one of my children said, I'll put $100 a week into whatever you tell me, I would say without question it's silver. Over any cryptocurrency, over anything. But with that being said, I think it's a mistake to ignore gold. You could argue trading your gold for silver right now at 100-to-1 ratio is a smart thing to do. You could argue it. I don't know that I would trade it all, but I could argue you trade it at 100-to-1, and if all that happens is it regresses to its 200-year price ratio, you're talking a double, which is about 43-4-to-1. It's average for the past 150 years or so. You're talking over a double. You switch back into gold. That would still mean it's coming out of the ground at 7 times higher or lower than that ratio would suggest. It's coming out of the ground at 7-to-1. You go to 42-to-1, you're 6 times higher at that number than its geological ratio is. So when you talk about someone saying you can double the amount of gold that you have, you know, that's the kind of thing you run from, because it would have a huge amount of risk. But if I said to you, all that would happen is that you just have to get to the 100 to price averages between the two of 150 years. Well, yeah, I'll do that. If just getting to the average means a double plus, why not? And that's what I mean about it being a tremendous trade asymmetrically, low risk, high upside. And if you really wanted to put pie in the sky if you get anywhere near its geologic average, you know, you could argue it's 11 times undervalued right now based upon its geologic footprint. You don't see things like that very often. And this is a direct byproduct of suppression by the Western banks, which have created all these distortions in not only in physical silver, but in mining shares. And certainly you can see that in the distorted ratio between the two, which, you know, it's been here less than about 1/5 of 1% of the last 150 years at this number. So if you're a betting man or woman, I would say you don't get many opportunities like this. Trade your gold into silver with the intention of trading it back when the ratio even comes near its 250-year average, 150-year average, 200-year average. It's a double plus. So yeah, this is unusual time where silver's in the driver's seat. But when the dust settles, if I only could buy one thing, period, and forget about upside, it would probably be gold, because when the dust settles, I think that's where the biggest money in the world will be. But if you want to add a little speculation, and maybe the finest speculation I've ever seen in terms of risk versus reward, it's silver. And I mean, at what point does the geologic ratio have to come into play? If it's being mined at a 7-to-1 ratio, meaning silver is disappearing, to keep it that far distorted creates too many arbitrage options, I think. And so, you know, the market can be irrational longer than people can be solvent. But I think once you get anywhere near that, you're in such rarefied air that's when you mortgage the house and trade your gold and go into silver, or back up the truck into silver, because it's in many ways, I think, strategic metal, more important than gold in many ways. The world doesn't view it that way yet, but there are some that do. And I've said it forever. To me, it's the military industrial complex and their need for silver to make high-tech weapons that are the ones that have held the price down. That's why you have a handful of Western banks that have created this short position, both on London LBMA and on COMEX. Why else would they be stupid enough to carry these massive naked short positions in silver more so than in any other commodity that is traded? It's because they need them to make high-tech weapons to blow up, countries like the Ukraine, and that same military industrial complex, aka BlackRock, gets all the reconstruction contracts. I mean, it's a game that they've been playing for a long time, and they took silver out of the Silver Institute numbers of supply and demand. So we don't realize that there's 500 ounces in the Tomahawk cruise missile and all of the high-tech weaponry, tons of it. So if they're going to make this stuff to fund war, perpetually, well, you got to step on the canary, and that's, the price of silver. But you have countries that are now motivated enough to push back against that and understand what they're doing, and that's the dangerous part. That's why I think things are changing, is that you have countries that are now on par, at least in terms of their sophistication and their wealth, to be able to challenge the Western game of rehypothecation and shorting, naked shorting, to create an illusion of reality, what these commodities are actually worth. We don't know what they're really worth. We don't know what that ratio really should be, because it's been controlled for too long by the interests of I believe, the military-industrial complex. There will come a time if something like, and I've heard about this solid-state battery for a while now, where you see a battle between the industrials and the hedge funds or the bullion banks, where the industrials say, screw it, just get it, buy it, we need it. Look, China has been flying around buying concentrate and doré directly from the miners. I talk to Keith Neumeyer once in a while, and he talks about, last year was the first year he had seen auto manufacturers come directly to the trade shows and speak directly to Keith and others, mining executives, to disintermediate the marketplace, go right to the miners. At some point, the industrial need for this stuff, it'll be get it while you still can and secure it. Silver is what's called inelastic, because if you only need a tiny little bit to make your iPhone work or your flat screen TV, well, it doesn't matter how high the price goes, you pass that on. But if you're only talking, pennies per unit, well, if it's now 10 cents per unit, yeah, it's gone up, but it's such a small part of the entire cost that it's not that big of a deal. When you start talking things like this, where there's that much silver used in every battery, yeah, it becomes more of an issue. So this is why naked shorting silver at a time when the industrial demand is growing, not only that, the monetary recognition by much of the world, its military needs, its plurality in uses. Most commodities don't have plurality of uses. You don't use wheat for anything other than, making vodka or making bread. How did I put vodka there first is the question. But, the point of, or alcohol, the point of it is that the plurality of silver in its industrial uses, its military uses, it's strategic. It's not even industrial. And then you have a realization of its monetary uses. Yeah, its value has been held back by Western banks that have been able to do this for a very long time without being challenged. That seems to be changing. So yeah, to me, the industrial side, things like the solid state battery, it's huge. And you're seeing an asset that is growing in terms of its uses while it's depleting in terms of its footprint. That's why forever it was 16 to 1. For 5,000 years, not only the geologic ratio, but the price ratio was 16 to 1. And now the price ratio is 100 to 1, but the geologic ratio is 7 to 1. It's because the low-lying fruit had been picked. I've said it a million times, silver is found in nature in something called epithermal. Your skin is epidermis, near the surface. Epithermal means the big deposits were found a long time ago. They're not deep. And so there's only a handful, 5, 6, 7 silver companies, major ones. The rest of the silver production, of the 850 million ounces mined last year, under 200 plus, just barely over 200 million came from silver companies. The rest was byproduct mining by companies that don't mine silver. They just stumble across it. So yeah, it checks every box, depleting in nature, increasing in its uses, plurality in its uses, not just one area. And I think recognized by the world after being held down for a long period of time by the West, which it could be the undoing of some of the biggest banks in the world if all of a sudden this gets really, really interesting. So who knows how far we are away from that? But yeah, you don't see opportunities like this very long, but it's a pain in the ass because it's counterintuitive. It's movements, the continued suppression. It's these are some powerful people, and they've been able to keep the ball, up in the air for a long time. Will they be able to continue? Who knows? But as things get more interesting, let's say with the West and our reserve status and our image on the global stage, alternatives to the dollar, like silver, like gold, like farmland, like oil, like all of these commodities become far more important to the world than they do as just a basic commodity to make things with. So yeah, I don't think you get many chances like this, man. I truly don't, especially if you're young. I mean, it's a bet worth taking.